All right, well, good morning, Cedar Crest. How is that for a way to start church this morning? Are y'all excited to be here? Awesome. Wait, if I haven't had a chance to meet you yet, my name is Cody Harmon. I'm one of the LifeGroup pastors here at Cedar Crest over our college and student ministries. And so I think the guys are still trying to put on some dry clothes right now, but we are so proud of those guys for myself and even our team, just getting to see them grow over this past year, and the investment Brian has made into their life has been awesome. So I'm glad that you guys as our church family got to be a part of that as well this morning. It's a lot of fun to see that. And so today we're going to do just a different kind of message this morning. We ended kind of part one of our Exodus series last week that Pastor Van had been in for the last several weeks. And next week we're going to be starting our Advent series, getting ready for the Christmas season. So you're going to make sure that you're going to want to make sure that you're here for that to be a part of what God is doing there. But this morning we're going to be in the book of Esther, and I want to talk about time. All right, is anybody else in here with me that you just feel like you need more time, or there's just not enough time to get stuff done, or the little bit of time that you have ends up going to things that maybe you don't feel like are priorities or are the important things in your life? Or maybe you're like me and you kind of go through different seasons where there's times where you're like, man, my life is a well-oiled machine. I'm getting all of this stuff done. I'm the most productive I've ever been. And then sometimes you're up until 1 o'clock in the morning on watching cat videos on YouTube, and you're like, how did I get here? And what is happening right now? And I know earlier this year, I was kind of like I turned into kind of a grumpy old man, and I was like, you know what? I'm never gonna download TikTok. That's just, I'm not gonna do it, never gonna do it. And I held out for so long. And then something happened, and I was like, man, I feel like I'm missing out on something here. And then I started doing student ministry stuff again here at Cedar Crest, and I was like, man, there's gonna be all these references that I don't get, and I don't wanna be like that guy that's like, oh, hey, I saw this, and they're like, dude, that was 6 months ago. And so I was like, all right. And so I finally decided to download TikTok. And I heard all these things about how distracting it is and how addicting it is and all that, and I was like, I'm a grown man. I think I got it. I'm pretty sure I can handle this. And so one day I downloaded it that morning, and I was like, all right, it was an off day, and I was like, I'm just going to download this and look at it a little bit throughout the day. And so me and my wife were just hanging out at our apartment and just doing some stuff around the house, and I was going to do laundry. So I grabbed the laundry and then went over to the washer, and then I stood there, and something in my brain was like, this is a good time to check out TikTok, see what's going on TikTok from the last 30 seconds that you weren't on it. And so I was standing there, and then I just got on my phone, and I was like, all right, sweet. And then was just scrolling through TikTok, and I don't know how long, but at some point, my wife walked up, and she was like, what are you doing? And I'm just standing there, and I'm on my phone, and I was like, I don't know. And she was like, have you started the laundry yet? And I was like, I don't think so. And I'm just holding my phone, and she's like, have you just been standing in front of the washer watching TikToks? And I was like, yeah, I think I was. And she was like, are you okay? And I was like, I'm gonna delete TikTok. I think that's what I'm gonna do. And I made it 6 hours, and I just couldn't do it. And my time was just gone. I couldn't do anything. It was just out the window. And I don't know if you're like me and you're trying to figure out how do you get through these distractions in life. You're trying to get through these different things that happen, or maybe, we're getting into the holiday season, and this is the busiest time of the year for you. And I'm pretty sure all of us in here, if I walked up to each one of you this morning and was like, hey, how are you doing? All of our responses would probably be something along the lines of, oh, we're great. We're really busy, but we're great. And that our whole life kind of falls into this category of we're just busy all the time. And that doesn't really change, but what I think does change is that sometimes we wear it like a badge of honor. Right? We're like, man, I've got all this stuff going on. I'm getting things done. I'm doing these things. And we don't know if they're good things or if they're things that we want to do, but we just know that they're things and they're getting done and we're handling it. And so we wear busyness like a badge of honor. And we're proud when we tell people that we're really busy. Or maybe you go through a season like that and you realize that the stuff that you're investing your time in or that you're putting your time towards, you're like, man, this actually isn't what I want my life to look like at all. But much like the guys that got baptized this morning, and they were like, man, I was doing one thing, and I don't think that that's really what I want my life to be about. And I don't think that that's what should define me. And so we go the other direction, and we start to kind of lose track of what we're even trying to do, and then we get burned out. And so we're either living in this badge of honor kind of season, or we're living in a burnout season where we are just spending our time in distractions, and things are just kind of passing us by, and we're not actually getting to experience life. And so I think the trap that we fall in with this is that we start thinking about time in a way that we were never intended to think about time in the first place. right? The issue is we start to think about time like it's a resource for us to control, when in reality, time is a gift that we should steward. And when we make that distinction, then I think that something shifts in our life. It changes how we view God. It changes how we view our lives. And it's going to radically change how we actually live our lives and how we see our purpose. And so this morning, we're going to look at, like I said, the book of Esther. If you're following along, either on your phones or in your Bibles, if you find the book of Job, it's like 97 chapters long. So if you hit Job, just go back a book, and then you'll be at Esther. That's a good way to find it. And Esther, the book of Esther is awesome. Like it's like a Disney movie on steroids, all right? And I'm not exaggerating. There's like a normal girl named Esther. She's just kind of an everyday girl living in ancient Persia that ends up becoming a queen. You've got the king who is like kind of doing all of these just kind of crazy things that you're like, man, what is happening right now? There's a bad guy who's trying to get all this power and become king himself. And then Esther's uncle is there as kind of the like wise, like sage. Like it's literally like a Disney movie on steroids. And what I love about this is that it's such a short book, but it's really just about these normal, everyday people that see God do something crazy in their life. It's these normal people that they're just kind of going through life. They're just kind of doing what they feel like everybody else is doing, or just kind of what they should be doing. And they see God step in and do something insane just from them being a part of these things. And so we're going to start off in chapter 2 of Esther, but just to bring us up to speed, to kind of set the stage so you know kind of what's happening up to this point. In this book, Esther is a Jewish girl that she's living in Persia, and so there's a kind of a Jewish community there, and King Xerxes is over this kind of area in Persia and over this kingdom, and King Xerxes and his wife get into an argument, and he wants her to do something, and she's like, no, I'm not doing that, and then he gets mad at her, so he decides to throw a beauty pageant to find a new wife. I don't recommend that, like, ever. Like that, guys, if you get in an argument, you're just like, yep, you're right. That's a better way to go than like, hey, you know what? I'm going to throw a beauty pageant and see where it goes. Like, that's what I'm talking about a crazy Disney movie, like on steroids. And so Xerxes is like, you know what? I'm going to throw a beauty pageant. And that's just kind of where we're at. And so his people and the people that he's in charge of end up bringing all these different women that are going to be in this beauty pageant together. And Esther is one of these women. And so there's this whole kind of process that they go under. Like, this wasn't just like a flippant like decision of like, we're just going to throw this beauty pageant together and I'm going to get a new wife next weekend. We'll go through one of those drive-through wedding ceremony things and I'll have a new wife next week. This is a year-long process that Esther went through with all of these other women as a part of this whole kind of competition. Like, this is like an ancient, like, bachelor kind of thing. And they're like, it's this weird kind of thing that he's making these people do. And so Esther is a part of this whole process, but it's a 1-year process to get ready to be a part of this. And so where we pick up is kind of the end of that process, where for a year, Esther has been going through this thing with all these other women as a part of this beauty pageant for King Xerxes. And so in chapter 2, starting in verse 15, this is what it says happens to Esther in the midst of this. It says, when the turn came for Esther, the young woman Mordecai had adopted the daughter of his uncle Abihail. To go to the king, she asked for nothing other than what Haggai, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the harem, suggested. And Esther won the favor of everyone who saw her. She was taken to King Xerxes in the royal residence in the 10th month, the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. And now the king was attracted to Esther more than to any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. All right, so Esther goes through this whole process. She's been doing this for a year. She's now made queen. And so King Xerxes has a new queen, and Esther has done what she needed to do to be a part of this. Right, and it even says in here that Esther won the favor of everyone who saw her. Like, Esther was good at this. Like, she was the scripture says that she was a beautiful young woman, that she charmed people, that people just loved being around her, that she was just a fun person to be around. And so when it came to these social situations and the things that were expected of the people that were part of this beauty pageant, that she did really well in those things. And so you may be thinking like, okay, I came to church this morning and I've never been in a beauty pageant for the king of Persia, so I don't know what this means for me or what I'm supposed to do with any of this. But I think we all have way more in common with Esther than we think that we do. right? Because Esther didn't really sign up for this. She was just kind of a part of this whole process of finding someone for this beauty pageant. But when she was in that, she started to climb the ladder really well, right? Like this was kind of like her equivalent of like, she was just supposed to be a part of this. So she was like, well, I'm just going to do a good job at this, right? Like the way that we're just, you're expected to have a college that you're going to go to when you graduate high school, or that you're going to have that job that you want when you get done with college, or that promotion that you're trying to get, or that house that you're trying to buy. There's all of these things that we're just expected to get, that maybe culturally, or maybe you feel that pressure. And so we just start climbing the ladder to do these things that we feel like we're expected to do. And so to do that, we have to start controlling our time. Because if we're gonna hit these marks that we feel like we have to hit at certain ages or at certain seasons of our life, we're gonna have to try to control our time like it's a resource. We're gonna have to squeeze every second that we have to get the most out of it, and to get all of these different things, and to set our lives up for what we want it to be. And so Esther may not have picked to be here, but she was controlling her time. And she used that year to win favor from people, and to show people that she was fun to be around, that she could be queen of Persia, that she could do all of these things. And what it doesn't say in here, and what I wonder, is that if Esther ever stopped to even think like, man, is being the queen of Persia even gonna make me happy? Right? Is this even what I should be doing with my life? Right? Or did she think about the things that maybe she would be able to do as the queen of Persia, with people that she could maybe help, or the things that she would be able to step into? And or was she trying to control her time? And if she was like, well, I'm expected to do this, I'm expected to be a part of this, and so I'm just gonna make the most of it. Right? I'm gonna get the spot in the palace, and I'm gonna get the pool, and somebody just feeding me grapes off a vine, and like, who wouldn't want those things? And so she's like, I'm just gonna control my time and get through this and do what I can to be a part of that. Right? And so we probably have those same thoughts, especially this time of the year, heading into a really busy season, where you're gonna be making a mad dash through the holidays for the next month. Right? Like you probably came to church to forget about that for a couple hours, so sorry for reminding you of that, a family coming in town, and all the things that you gotta do, and all the things that are gonna be going on. But we start to get into this mode where we know we're gonna be around these people, and we know that there's people around us that like we're trying to impress them at Thanksgiving with all the stuff we accomplished that year, and all the things that we bought, and then the rest of the year we forget that we were talking about them behind their back. And we start to do all these things, or maybe we're just trying to squeeze every ounce of productivity or distraction or whatever that is out of our days. Maybe you're at the washer watching TikTok because you're like, I just don't know what else to do or how to get the most out of this. And so we just turn to that, and we're just trying to get rid of that time. Or maybe you are just trying to control your time, and you're like, man, if this is the only life that I have, I'm gonna get as much as I possibly can. Whether that's financially, whether that's just attention or accolades from other people, whatever that is, we're like, man, I'm just gonna get what I can out of this life. But to do that, we have to control our time, and we have to make ourselves believe that we actually have a say in how all that stuff happens. But the problem is, control is a myth. Or the problem is, we can't control our time. That we trick ourselves with productivity hacks, or with different things when we make decisions, and we think that we can control what's happening. But the issue is that something always happens that we never see coming. Like, we can control our time as much as we want to, but there's always gonna be something that pops up, something that we weren't planning for, something that throws our plans off track, because we only know so much. And so something is gonna happen to throw us off course. And if we're trying to control our time, we're gonna have to deal with the consequences of that. But the other option is to steward our time. The other option is to look at our time like a gift, that it's not ours to decide what happens to it or how much of this that we get. Our only job is, when we see the time that we have, we just use it well, and we see what God wants us to do with that. Right? Because, like I said at the beginning, there was a guy named Haman who was the king's kind of right-hand man, and Haman wanted power. Like, he wanted the power that the king had. He wanted all of these things, and so Haman comes up with this idea that he's got Esther as his queen now, and her uncle Mordecai was causing issues for Haman, and so Haman decides that he wants to kill the Jewish people, so that way this isn't even an issue for him. And so in chapter 3, starting at verse 8, this is what it says. It says, then Haman said to King Xerxes, there is a certain people dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom who keep themselves separate. Their customs are different from those of all other people, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them. And I will give 10,000 talents of silver to the king's administrators for the royal treasury. All right, and so Haman basically is using his position and his power to put out a hit on the Jewish people and getting the king to sign off on it. Right, and so back in this time, if a king issued a decree on something, that was basically him just saying, yep, I'm saying this is what's gonna happen, this is where we're going with that. And it was kind of like playground rules when you're in like elementary school where you're like, well, no takebacks. Like, we said it, so it's just gonna be a thing. Like, that's like what would happen where the king was like, well, I said it, so this is just gonna be a thing. But the issue was he didn't know that Esther was Jewish. Like, she didn't mention that in her kind of interview process. Like, she was like, I'm just gonna kind of hold that back as she went through that whole beauty pageant kind of thing. And so the king had no idea he was actually putting out a hit on his new wife that he just got when he kicked his old wife out and had a beauty pageant. And so he doesn't make great decisions. But he's basically put out a hit on his wife and her people by doing this. And so Mordecai, Esther's uncle, the kind of the wise sage of the Disney movie, like he steps in and he's like freaking out. Right, like Mordecai gets wind of this plan and he hears that all of the Jewish people are basically going to be planned on being taken out by Haman. And so Mordecai, it says, like, rips his clothes, like he's like weeping, like he is terrified because he doesn't want his people to be harmed and he doesn't want his people to die. And so Mordecai remembers, he's like, hey, my niece is now the queen of Persia and she's also Jewish. So if anybody can help and if anybody will help to get rid of this plan and to change how this is gonna happen, then it's gonna be her. And so Mordecai goes to the queen, he goes to Esther, and he asks for her help and enlists her help in this. And so this is kind of the back and forth that they have as they are figuring these things out. And so Mordecai goes to Esther and he's like, hey, you've got to step into this. You've got to help us in this. Like this is gonna happen. There's nothing we can do to stop it. You are the only one that can stop this. And so this was Esther's response. In Esther chapter 4, starting in verse 10, it says, then Esther instructed him to say to Mordecai, all the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that they be put to death unless the king extends the gold scepter to them and spares their lives. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king. All right, so think about what's going on in Esther's mind right now, where she's just heard, like, you're the only one that can save us, that you're our only hope to get through this thing. And Esther's like, you want me to die for this? Like she's like, I've got the Tesla, I've got the pool, I've got like the guy feeding me grapes, I've got like 87 channels to watch. I don't want to get rid of this stuff. Like, you really expect me to risk my life just to make this not happen? Like, she can't go to the king and ask for something unless the king calls her in so that she can actually ask. And so she's like, I'm not gonna go in and risk my life. Like, she's like, I've worked hard for this house that I've bought. I mean, she's worked hard for that spot in the palace, right? Or she's like, man, I've worked really hard for this position that I have, for this promotion that I just got. Or she actually worked hard for that spot with the king. Like, you see where I'm going with this? That we have these things in our life that we've worked really hard for, that we've controlled our time like a resource, and we've made it really far, and we've accomplished these things that we've wanted to accomplish, but then something happens. And we have to decide, are we gonna hold on to our position? Are we gonna hold on to the things that we have? Are we gonna hold on to the security that we think they are giving us? Or are we gonna give that up and just tell God, like, okay, do whatever you want to with this? Like, are we gonna keep trying to control time like it's a resource? Like, we have any idea how much time we even have, or like we have any idea what's happening outside of our own lives, of what God is doing? Or are we gonna hold on to those things? Or are we gonna be willing to give that up? Are we gonna be willing to realize that our time isn't even ours to begin with? That we have no say over it, we don't know what's gonna happen, that all we can do is be faithful right now. And so Esther is still in this mode where she's like, no, I'm gonna control my time. Like, I've gotten to this spot, I've worked really hard, I've done what I needed to do, so I'm gonna enjoy the things that I have. And Mordecai doesn't love this answer, because he's like, I don't know if you hear me, but we're all gonna die. Like, we are all in trouble here if you don't say something. If you don't give up your spot and say something, we are all gonna be in trouble. And so Mordecai sends back an answer. So in chapter 4, verse 13, Mordecai says, "Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape." And that's some tough love right there for Mordecai to drop that in. And then he says, "For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this." Right? I love that is Mordecai's response, that he doesn't get angry. It doesn't say that he kind of shows Esther that he's freaking out. Like, Mordecai actually trusts that even if Esther decides not to give up her position, he's like, look, we're gonna be delivered from somewhere. Right? It may not be you, but God is going to take care of his people, and we're going to be delivered by somebody. Maybe not you if you aren't faithful in this, but we're going to be delivered by someone. But then he reminds her that, like, hey, maybe you're not in this spot because you should just be successful. He's like, maybe you're not in this spot because you were really good at charming people or you were really good at this job. He's like, maybe you were in this spot because this was going to happen. It's like maybe you were in this spot because God has a greater purpose for your life than the stuff that you have or the position that you hold or where you live or what people think of you, that there is actually a greater purpose to your life. And he says, who knows, maybe you were created and maybe you were put in this position for such a time as this. That there is something greater that God is doing in your life. With whatever decision you see yourself trying to make right now, whatever season you feel like you're in, whatever it is that you are facing, whether it's good or bad, that instead of looking at that as like, okay, God, I worked really hard for this thing, I want to hold on to it. Or, hey, God, why do you have me in this season? I don't know where I'm going. Maybe we should think like Mordecai speaking to us and say, God, maybe you have put me here and created me for such a time as this. That we don't know how much time that we have, but we do know that we have today. We do know that we have right now. We do know that we have the things that God has put in front of us and that God promises to be there with us. So why not step into that in today? Because no matter what you are facing, if you're in here today, if you're watching online, that if you're paying attention to this, then if you're still in here, then God is not finished with whatever season he has you in. Right, and so when we start to see that, then we can start to see that maybe there is something greater than just the stuff that we have or the life that we're trying to build. Maybe God is trying to do something greater. And so in verse 16, this is how Esther responds to Mordecai. When she's kind of confronted with the stuff that she's holding on to and what she should do, this is what Esther says. She says, "Go and gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. And when this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." Right? Tim Tebow should have had Esther 4:16 written on his eyeblat, right? Like, this is like if that doesn't want to make you run through a brick wall, I don't know what will. But Esther's like, you know what? I get it. She's like, I've been holding on to these things. I've been trying to control my time. I've been trying to use this, but maybe God does have me here for such a time as this. And she's like, I'm going to actually go to the king. I'm going to do what you're asking me. I'm going to go try to save our people. And I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if I have tomorrow. And if I die, I die. And she's like, either way, I'm going to step in and be faithful right now and today with what God has put in front of me. That she realized she couldn't control this stuff anymore. That she was never in control to begin with. And so when we realize that time is just a gift for us to steward, we realize that we don't have to be in control of those things. She had to realize that there was more for her than just her resume or what she had accomplished or what she had accumulated, that there was actually the purpose of God on her life, that he was going to use her to be a part of something greater, right? Because when ordinary people encounter an extraordinary God, the purpose of their time matters much more than the amount of their time. Like, Esther doesn't know how much time she has. She doesn't know when she goes to talk to the king if she's going to be killed on the spot. But she's like, you know what? I have today. I have my God, and I'm going to step into this and just see what happens and just see God be faithful. And so this is how it ends. In chapter 8, Esther has gone to the king, and she's gone and told him, like, basically, hey, I am Jewish, and so you're putting out a hit on me. And then God starts to work all of these things together where the king's mind is changed and his heart is softened, and all of this kind of flips on its head. where Haman has been trying to kill Mordecai. He's been trying to get Mordecai out of the picture, and if other people have to die, then so be it. And so this is what it says in chapter 8. It's starting in verse 1. It says, that same day, King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. That Haman was actually killed instead, that the king put him out there to be killed, and then Esther got Haman's estate. And it says, and Mordecai came into the presence of the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. And the king took off a signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and presented it to Mordecai. And Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. When Esther decided to steward her time rather than control it, she got to see God come through. Like, she could not have controlled this. She could not have gotten her people free just on her own or by her own power. But when she gave up her time as a gift that God had given her, when she just gave God back what he had given her to begin with, she got to see God step in and come through in that situation in a way that she wouldn't if she was holding on and trying to control her time. Because when ordinary people come into contact with an extraordinary God, we're going to see incredible things happen. And it becomes less about how much time we have and what we want, and more about the purpose that God has put on our lives, right? And so me and my wife have been together for, I think, 7 years now total, like dating and everything. I know our anniversary. That's the only important part, and she would probably say the same thing. But so we started dating when we were both like college age back in like 2014, and we had been friends for a while. And so we kind of finally started dating. There was a whole, I think I've mentioned before, there was a whole kind of wilderness season where she rejected me, and then it was like a whole thing, and then we came back around, and it was great. And so in 2014, we started dating, and we had been dating for about 6 months, and we were really good friends before we started dating. And so it was just a really cool season of being together and learning how to date your best friend and all of that, and it was great. And so one day we had been dating, started dating in the spring, and then that fall we were at a friend's wedding. And we got a call that her mom was on the way to the emergency room, that she had fallen out of bed, and they didn't really know what was going on. So she was on her way to the emergency room. And from what we knew, we were like, okay, like we'll go to the emergency room, hang out for a little bit, pick her up, make sure that she's doing okay, and just get to hang out and to take her home. And we got there and walked into Kennestone, and we're just expecting to kind of hang out for a second and to see how she was doing. And so we got there, and then they actually ended up bringing us into like a separate waiting room, and we had never seen that before or been a part of that before. And so we walk in, and we're waiting for a little bit with her dad and her sister. And as we're waiting, we don't really fully know kind of what's happening, and again, are just expecting to take her home. And then after about 30 minutes or so, the doctor walks in, and she tells us that her mom had a heart attack, and that there wasn't anything that they could do to save her. And I remember us just kind of sitting there being like, what? Like, I don't get it. Like, I thought that something minor had happened, that this wasn't that big of a deal. And so we were sitting there just ready to just bring Lisa home and kind of get her set up there. And we realized that was going to be the last time that we had seen her. And that was a really tough season, but that was a lot for someone who's kind of college age, for Mary and her sister to figure out what that looks like to walk through life without their mom there, and to figure those things out. And there's a lot that we had to figure out just as a couple that was dating. Of, okay, we've been dating for 6 months. Like, how do we do this? Like, what is the right thing? Like, how do you get through this season? And there was a lot that we learned through that season. I got to see Mary trust God in ways that I've never seen somebody step in and trust that God was going to work in a situation or anything like that. And there was a lot that he was teaching us just together as we kind of went through that together as a couple. But I think one of the biggest things that we learned in the moment, and that we're still learning now, is that time is not a resource that we can control. Time is a gift for us to steward. Right? We don't know if we even have tomorrow. Right? We make all these plans, and I'm so bad about this, of just making plans and of trying to set these things up in my own life and in my own control. And I don't even know what tomorrow looks like. That was the biggest thing that we learned, is that we were like, this stuff can just happen. Like, we have no idea what that looks like. But we do know that we have today. And so instead of worrying about the future or worrying about what that looks like or how much we can control or how much we can get through those things, what I want to encourage us with this morning is exactly what we learned through that season. That we don't know how much time we have, and instead of that causing fear in us, or instead of that causing us to try to control the things that we do have, that we can trust God with today. That our God is a God of the present, that he is here with you right now, that we can trust what God is doing right now in this moment because he has promised to be with you. That he is a good father, that he is there to be faithful even when we feel like we are out of control. Right? And so if you are trying to figure out what this even looks like, and if you're like trying to kind of figure out your life's plan or your goal for the next 5 years as we head into the new year, I just want to encourage all of us that we have a chance to just step into the present with Jesus. That just like Esther, we don't have to control our time, we don't have to control our resources, that we can trust God with what we have right now. That we can just say, God, this isn't mine to begin with, that this is a gift from you. And so, God, more important than what I want for my life or what I want to set my life up as or what I want to do in the midst of this, God, I am trusting you just with today. That, God, use my life to show people your goodness. God, use my life to show people that you are faithful. God, that even if something happens to me, even if I lose the things that I've worked for, even if I step into something that I don't know how to get out of it, or like Esther, if we perish, God, we just want to trust you and give you all of ourselves. And a lot of times that means that we're giving God all of our plans as well. But I promise you that God has a greater purpose on your life than just what you want to use for your time. And so this morning, we're going to go into a time of response as the band comes out and leads us in some more worship. And so if you would, just stand up with me, just right where you're at. And I'm going to invite the prayer team to come down front as well, and some of our life group leaders that what we do here at Cedar Crest is anytime we do a Sunday morning, that we just want to give you an opportunity to respond to what God is doing in your life right now. That we want to give you an opportunity to respond to what God is speaking to you even in this moment. And so if you've been in a season where you feel like you're just trying to control time, that you have been busy, that you've been wearing that like a badge of honor of I've got all of these things going on and I'm going to figure out how to get through this, and you just feel like you need to let go of something or you need to let go of that, then we want to pray for that for you this morning. Or if you feel like you're in a season of burnout where you've been holding on so tight to your plans and to the control that you feel like you have over your resources or your time, and you're just tired of holding on to that, we want to pray for that too. That we want to pray that with the time that we all have in this room, that with today, that we want to trust God with that. We want to see God move in that. And so let's pray together as we head into a time of worship, as we see God continue to move in our lives. Jesus, thank you for this morning. God, thank you for the reminder that we aren't in control. God, thank you that we can't control the things that happen to us. God, thank you that we can't control our plans. God, thank you that we get to trust you. God, that as the creator of the universe, God, as the author of our life, God, that we get to trust you with everything that you have set up for us. God, that we don't have to have everything figured out. God, that we don't have to know exactly what we're doing because we know the God who has set all of these things up. And so, God, we pray this morning that you would just encounter us in this place. God, that you would be lifted up. God, that you would have all of us, our desires, our heart, our plans, all of the things that we have. God, we pray that you would step into those things this morning. And so, God, thank you for who you are. God, thank you that you love us. And God, we just worship you this morning. It's in your name we pray.